Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, we talk with the head of DARPA's Biological Technology Office. What priorities are the Advanced Research Agency tackling in an evolving age of warfare? And what problems is it trying to solve? Plus, a look at a program aimed at improving agricultural security. What are the threats the agency wants to counter? Coming to you from Washington, D.C., it's the latest in news and analysis, from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly.
Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Courtney Albin, the Space and Emerging Technology reporter for Defense News. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, commonly known as DARPA, is known for tackling some of the hardest defense technology problems. The agency is behind many of the cutting-edge systems in development for the U.S. military, but they also have a broad suite of research programs that many people don't know about. Today, we're joined by the head of the Biological Technologies Office, Dr. Michael Corris, to walk us through BTO's current portfolio of projects. Mike, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me, Courtney.
So maybe to start, could you give us an overview of kind of what your office does and why it's important to national security and what DoD is doing now?
Certainly. So BTO, the Biological Technologies Office, is the newest office at DARPA. It's 11 years old, so not a new foundling, but it is a new office. And DARPA is always changing, so many of the offices that initially existed have changed their mission or scope, or new offices now exist and old offices don't exist anymore. So it's an ever-changing place, which is exciting because that's the mission, right? The mission is to stay relevant on the scientific side, on the technological side, and we all know technology advances very, very rapidly. So with the advent of a lot of biological technologies being more mature, being more capable of affecting both humans, crops, livestock, whatever have you, the Biological Technologies Office was stood up and in 2014. And we're now focusing on the warfighter. So that's the human system. That is the most important asset to the DoD, certainly. And we're also looking holistically at biological systems, be it livestock or be it crops, for example. So that's all part of our mission space.
Okay, great. Can you give us a sense of kind of what your office's resourcing looks like for 2026 and kind of what some of your top priorities are from that perspective?
So I can talk broadly about what DARPA's resourcing is like, and there's 6 technology offices, so the interested viewers fair to make their inferences with regards to it. DARPA is about $4.3 billion, give or take, in fiscal 25. We'll see how that goes in fiscal 26. The 6 tech offices take their share, depending on what their actual mission sets are, depending on how large the systems are that they work on. The priorities for us on the biological technology side are threefold. We really have to understand how we accelerate the development of data generating abilities for training of foundational models or AI systems. We all are very interested in understanding what is the art of the possible with regards to training AIs and essentially accelerating the training of AIs on the physical world. So not the text models that you and I may be using as ChatGPT or Claude or whatever have you, but really a system that we prompt saying like, what does reality look like? And the system needs to tell you what reality looks like and actually be correct. That's actually quite hard to do for these systems. So that's one. The second thing that is also critically important is the live chain. We may speak about that later a little bit. It's combat casualty care. As we mentioned, the warfighter is a big part of our mission set. The warfighter is under constant threat, certainly from enemy activity, but also unmanned systems, drones, even more so. We've looked at various different conflicts, including the Ukraine and Russia conflict, where drones are the prevalent form of warfare and injury. That changes how we need to think about combat casualty care, and we own that responsibility. And thirdly, we're also looking around into what can be done to actually know more of what biological threats or just like activities are that are going on around the globe. We actually don't have a good way of understanding what the latest and greatest strains of various different viruses are that are floating around the globe. We know it happens. We don't know with great detail what happens. We don't have that type of resolution that you would get, for example, from a satellite looking at a landmass, for example. So we're lacking that type of capability. So that's really what we're excited about.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm excited to dig more into some of that later in our conversation. You mentioned that your office has been around since 2014. It does seem like recently there's been kind of a growing recognition of the importance of biotechnology and an emphasis on kind of the need for early research to support that. A few years ago, we saw DoD publish its first biomanufacturing strategy, which is a little different than what you're talking about, but that kind of pushed for more investment in this area. At DARPA, how have you seen interest and urgency grow in recent years for BTO?
I think biomanufacturing as a subtopic is also still included in our thought space because broadly speaking, biology does certain things well and other things not. So the question becomes, where is biology privileged to create or prevent surprise, which is DARPA's core mission, strategic surprise. And I think what we can say is that biology actually, it packs quite well, so it usually comes in very small form factors because it can grow. It can grow, it can replicate itself, so you have actually abilities to, for example, think about manufacturing in space, right? So shooting stuff into orbit is expensive, so you want to have the minimum amount of mass that you move into orbit. That's a huge area of interest for us. Secondly, however, also on the biological side, we recognize that the interest in biology has increased, and we do want to do our part to put that signal out in the world to say, like, okay, let's really figure out how we can use biology. But not just, and my former academic self will recognize that, we don't always make a product in academia or even in startup land that is actually robust enough to be used by a DoD customer. Okay. So there's a gap that we have to recognize and we got to do better at, which is to say, I will make a system or a product and it will work reliably every time. Okay. That's really critical. And that's a different hurdle that I think many of us recognize and are getting after.
I don't know if this fits a little bit into that, discussion, but I'm also a little bit curious about kind of the state of the biotech industrial base in the U.S. And can you speak a little bit to kind of where the strengths are, where maybe there's some gaps, but also then like how that industrial base could help maybe with the problem you just described of pushing some of these projects or this technology further and making the readiness piece?
I think most people will agree that the biotech industrial base in the United States is primarily focused on therapeutics and diagnostics, so very heavily aligned on the clinical side, as it should be. There's been enormous advances that the United States and other countries have been able to achieve over the last couple decades with regards to treatment of many different kinds of diseases, as well as better and better diagnostics, certainly. So we've made all the advances, all the Nobel Prizes for these types of advances. Having said that, you're now thinking about, again, using technologies that were developed for clinical use and clinical price points, okay, and we're now translating them to an industrial use and industrial price point. So there's still a translational gap that has been harder to get over than not from the industrial base. So I did a couple startups myself, so I'm familiar with that part of the space, and there is a growing body of startups that is excited about using biology and biological chemistry for these types of industrial approaches. Still hard, still growing, so it's not in scope and size similar to, let's say, for example, the traditional defense industrial base. Okay. And I would love for a closer connection of that entirety, also the medical industrial base, with us, because most of the work that we do will need to be transitioned to some commercial entity at some point in time in order for it to be successful.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like it's time for us to take a break. When we come back, we'll discuss a DARPA biotech project that's focused on agricultural security. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly, where we're chatting with Dr. Michael Korus, head of the Biological Technologies Office at DARPA. Mike, your office has a project called Ag BTO, which I understand is focused on agricultural security. Can you walk us through kind of the DARPA hard problem you're trying to get after through this effort?
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. The interesting question is really what is still left to be done in the agricultural space to make us feel more secure, to defend ourselves against, God forbid, man-made threats, but also plenty of natural threats that are around, whether they be viral, bacterial, pests, whatever have you. We observe that there's still a good amount of work that needs to be done to essentially have two kinds of solutions that would make me feel better, at least as a frequent consumer of food. I would very much like to see our food supply, whether it's, by the way, livestock or crops, be better protected from pests and threats transiently. That means there's a treatment that we have, let's say, for example, say citrus screening. If all the citrus groves in the United States get citrus screening at the same time, that's a really bad deal. And we cannot change the background with whatever intervention of the citrus grove in the trees. So we have to have some sort of spray or other therapeutic intervention that we can use. And we don't have enough good ones that last long enough because, of course, it's a competition. So the pest or the virus may evolve resistance against those. That's really bad. And then at the same time, if we want longer-term solutions that have to be fixed in the cultivar, the thing that we grow, that takes years, 5 to 8 years. So we have a gap between the last use of a short-term solution and the first use of a long-term solution. And we really would like to close that gap.
Okay.
So both pushing the short-term solutions and pulling in the long-term solutions. That's a big, big deal for us.
Okay.
And then thirdly, there's this triangle of solutions that we're looking for. The third vertex of the triangle is we don't really know what all the various different pests or agricultural threats are that are out there. So a little bit of surveillance to understand like what's creeping and crawling around and the field is really necessary for us.
Okay, all right. Can you give us a sense of why this project in particular is important from a national security perspective?
Yeah, so the administration put out a important document called Farm Security is National Security. I encourage everybody to read that. There is a recognition that pests are a long-term threat that we really have to think about. There's also, of course, ever-increasing shipments of goods around the globe and certainly into the United States via import. And we have to recognize that each import brings with it a certain risk. And you may, if you live in the Arlington area here in Virginia, see these lanternflies around. They're really pretty. Turns out they're not from here, unfortunately, and they are an invasive species. They have no natural predators. You can't get rid of them. So we have to think about what we do when these invasive species take a hold in our ecology, which they will severely disrupt, unfortunately, because of their being outside of the food chain. And we have to figure out what we can do in order to actually deal with this. We're happily partnering with our colleagues at USDA and other agencies across the interagency to take a stab at that, because it is really concerning that we have not been able to come up with better solutions for that type of problem.
So me stepping on as many lanternflies as I can isn't really going to be the sustainable solution.
It is a good job, though. Everybody should do this. However, it will not, unfortunately, get to the root cause.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that context in mind, can you talk a little bit about kind of the programmatics, I guess, of Ag BTO? How long have you been working on this, and what are kind of some of the milestones coming up?
It's actually a really exciting program. So the subject matter is critically important, right? Everybody eats 3 times a day. The second part is also really important. DARPA is always looking for innovation, and maybe your viewer base will appreciate that. We're also looking for innovation in contracting. Contracting is hard. Contracting takes a lot of time. And we're pioneering a new contracting vehicle that's called ARIS. It is called the ARIS Marketplace that allows you to be selected and be selectable as a selectee to then be a part of a group that essentially figures out what the project should be. So it is a post-selection award mechanism that we're looking to pioneer here. We have activated the industry. We've been to UAUC in Illinois, and we've been to Iowa State and Iowa, of course, to talk to both the academic as well as the startup and large industrial base to get them excited about these types of projects. And we've had wonderful attendance for both of those events. The marketplace will close at the end of this month. That is August, so the submissions need to be in by then. We're going to take a few weeks to review them, and then we're going to make our selections, and we're going to invite them to DARPA in Arlington in October 10th, so 10/10, in order to shape what the actual right solutions should be that we will then award also very quickly and move out on. So the projects themselves should be 6 to 9 months long. And that is to say, we call those seedling projects, so they're not the hugest amount of money, but not small either. And they allow us to get at a critical question and say, like, okay, if this question can be answered in the affirmative or rejected, what can we then go and do a bigger project on? So that's sort of the structure.
Okay. Do you have a sense for how many vendors you might choose for
this? So interesting point about the ARIS Marketplace, by the way. So you get selected from DARPA's side, for example, but anybody with a .mil email address, so in the entire DoD, is actually able to now work with those particular kinds of vendors also. So it's a huge enabler, in our opinion, to allow especially both universities and small companies to take part of that entire ecosystem on the defensive, on the DoD side. We're looking for about 7 to 10 vendors, project teams. So you can happily team, you can do multiple teams, whatever you want. So we actually have virtual full flexibility to form the right kind of teams for the research that we think needs to be done in the short time that we give our vendors to work.
If I can ask a little bit more
Please.
about ARIS, I'm curious kind of what kind of interest you've had from within DoD in this type of, I guess, model or marketplace approach, and maybe if there was an underlying kind of need that drove you to create this marketplace.
The underlying need is we always need to go quicker. At DARPA, most people that work on the government side have a very limited tenure, so I myself have 4 years total. I'm partway through that already. It's a very short period of time, so when somebody tells me that it takes a year to get something on contract, like I can't sit idly by. That doesn't work. So luckily our contracts shop, the CMO, Contracts Management Office at DARPA is wonderful, and they've innovated this new approach, and we're pioneering this, and I think folks in the DoD are watching. As that starts to work, I think it'll maybe transition to other offices as well, into other agencies inside the DoD.
Great. Well, it looks like it's time for another break. When we come back, our financial expert returns with her latest financial tips, and then later we'll wrap up our conversation with Dr. Corus from DARPA. Don't go away.
Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with her latest tips for keeping your financial affairs in order. Have a look.
Your credit utilization ratio might sound complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's a measure of how much of your available credit you're using, and it plays a big role in your credit score. The general rule of thumb is to use less than 30% of your total credit limit. For example, if you've got a credit limit of $500 on a credit card, you want to keep your balance at or below $150. If you're able to do that, lenders will know you're handling credit responsibly and not stretching yourself too thin. The timing of your payment matters too. Even if you pay off your balance every month, if your balance is reported before you pay, it could look like you're using more credit than you actually are. Paying earlier in your billing cycle keeps your reported balance lower and your utilization ratio down. You can also lower your ratio by increasing your credit limit or opening a new card. Just make sure your spending doesn't go up. These strategies work best when your habits stay the same. Keeping an eye on your balances and being mindful of your credit usage is smart credit management. And smart credit management equals successful money management.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, ping the radar on your nuclear submarine to hit militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most informed sailor in the pool for swim training, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning bringing you the most recent headlines. And if social media is how you stay up to date, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And we're on TikTok, so go follow us there as well. When we come back, the conclusion of our conversation with Dr. Michael Corus. Don't go away.
Welcome back to Defense News Weekly, where we're talking with DARPA's head of biological technologies, Dr. Michael Corus. Mike, another BTO effort that I'm interested in is called LiveChain. This project is focused on tactical combat casualty care. Can you walk us through kind of this project, the origins, and what you all are doing here?
Absolutely. The tactical combat casualty care, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the primary responsibilities for BTO, because our warfighters are the most lethal, the most trained, the most well-equipped, and the most valuable parts of the United States military. And when you get injured, we need to contend with the fact that the modern battlefield may look quite a bit different than the prior battlefield. Historically, the United States has enjoyed enormous superiority and dominance in the air domain, in the land domain, in every domain. So our historical military care paradigm was somebody will get injured, that is really unfortunate, but we're able to airlift that person into the highest level of care as quickly possible. So that's what we call as the golden hour. Okay. The golden hour means that within an hour we'll get you to a crack team of surgeons that is the best in the world, that will take care of you, and you have an extraordinarily high chance of survival. Unfortunately, we have to contend with the fact that in the modern battlefield, air dominance may be heavily contested, and we may not be able to move our casualties with the frequency or the speed that we used to have. If that is the case, what does care need to look like? Because we still owe it to the warfighter to provide the best care as far forward as possible. And that's our approach with the LiveChain. If we can't move the warfighter to the care, we'll just move the care to the warfighter. Okay. Now, that's easier said than done, but that's what we're getting after.
Interesting, okay. My understanding is that in the recent reconciliation bill, DARPA received additional funding for this effort. Can you talk a little bit about how that funding helps to move the project forward, and give us a little kind of sense of the status of the program and how much, or where you're all at in that?
Thank you. Yeah, we've been incredibly fortunate that we were appropriated some more funding for the combat casualty care research. And the funding is critical for a number of different factors. Number one of the resources that is always in very scarce supply is blood. Please donate blood if you can. It is critically important. Unfortunately, even if you do, blood has a short shelf life, 40 days, give or take. It's actually shorter than milk. So we face the fact that blood will always need to be cycled. So every 40 days, whatever you donated will be switched out for some new donation. That's one. The second thing is our blood groups are all different, as people understand. And the third thing is, even if we do donate here CONUS blood, it needs to get where it needs to get. And that supply chain is far, it's long, and you may not be able to get there because of the contestation of the environment, unfortunately, in a potential future conflict. So our solution to that problem is that we will make a blood substitute that is universal, number one, and also shelf stable. So you can just take it with you, and it's actually shelf stable at room temperature, at high temperatures, and so on. That's a wonderful program that we call F-Sharp that we're able to now, with these funds, scale up. And DARPA does these things historically from technology readiness level, TRL, 0 to 3 or 4. With these extra funds, we now have the ability to actually push this further and say, like, look, we can actually go and scale this up to thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of units of this blood substitute that can then actually be trial tested and even forward deployed. That's really wonderful. The second big problem is there is never enough physicians, never enough medics, never enough corpsmen for anybody, and we may actually face challenges getting those people where they need to be in the future also. So what can we do to actually bring medical skill forward? And we're considering autonomy for those approaches also. That's a really, really high bar. Of course, a drone flies around, fine, it's maybe some form of autonomy. To have an autonomous medical device that saves you when you're injured, that is properly DARPA hard. So those are some of the efforts that we're getting after. And eventually, we would like to live in a future where medical personnel can leverage these types of technologies, proliferate them across the battlefield, and of course, we can then also transition these technologies into the civilian sector, rural environments where there's always a care desert. When there's mass casualties through earthquakes or natural disasters, you never have enough medical personnel. So having actually autonomous systems that really scale up the caregivers and the medical personnel, whether it's civilian or military, that is what we're getting after with this kind of funding.
Okay, great. Well, it's been great to talk to you, and that's all the time we have for today. I just want to thank you again for the conversation. We really appreciate your time and insight.
Thank you, Carly, for having me.
For coverage of all these topics and more, visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com. And you can also track our latest headlines on all of our social media channels. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.